So I saw Creed 3 this weekend, starring Michael B. Jordan, also directed by Michael B. Jordan, Tessa Thompson, and Jonathan Majors. This one is the first film in the Rocky/Creed franchise to not include Sylvester Stallone in any sort of capacity. But Adonis Creed is now facing somebody from his own past that has nothing to do with his father Apollo, and he feels a strong calling to go back into the ring one more time against his former friend in order to right the wrongs of his past. As someone who's a big fan of the Rocky franchise, loved the first Creed, and really liked the previous film Creed 2, I wasn't really sure if I was going to be down for a Creed 3, but the trailers instantly piqued my curiosity, including the appearance of Jonathan Majors, who's already rising to prominence thanks to his role as Kane the Conqueror in the MCU. I won't go into every detail, but I am going to mention some things about Creed 3, so mild spoiler warning if you don't want to know. Given that this is the first time that Michael B. Jordan is directing behind the camera as well as starring in it, just like Sylvester Stallone did with some of the previous Rocky films, there's a lot of close-up shots that sometimes get in the way of what we can actually see what's happening, but there is really a strong sense of intensity in the fights. And he throws a little twist in with the final fight that I was not anticipating. In the beginning of the film, we get to see him fight Pretty Ricky Conlan one more time, getting to live a life of retirement with his wife and his daughter, and his bond with his daughter is so endearing and adorable, especially when she decides that she might want to fight one day in the ring. Donnie with his daughter, I guess you could say, manages to achieve what Rocky wasn't able to do with his own son. As for his wife Bianca, she's still in the music industry, but because of her hearing disability, she's not able to perform, so she writes songs for other people to sing on stage for her. She says to him later in the movie, "It's not exactly what I expect, but I've also learned to live with it and accept it." I like seeing the evolution of the relationship between the two. He's not really keen on talking about feelings as opposed to her, but inevitably with some persistence, he is able to open up to her about certain things, in particular with Damien. And instead of being initially resistant of him going back into the ring once again, she knows at this point that he's a fighter by heart, and the only way that he can deal with his past hurts is to go into the ring and let it all out with the punches. As for Jonathan Majors as Damien, or Dame, the moment he shows up in this movie, the movie instantly for me became very riveting. There's no hostility between either of them, but we all know at some point something's going to happen that's going to cause a rift between the two. This guy Damien just got out of 20 years in prison, and he's willing to become a professional fighter, feeling like his time is running out. Despite the initial skepticism from his trainer and from other people in the gym, Donnie manages to put him up against a certain opponent, in vein of what Apollo did for Rocky in the original film. And certain things happen which causes the rift between the two, and when he discovers certain things that Damien was hiding from him, Donnie decides that the only way to settle this is to go back into the ring and put him in his rightful place. The previous two Creed films were the types of movies where the older generation passes the torch to the new generation. This film takes the torch and runs all the way down the field with it. Just to be clear, I do prefer the previous two entries, but this is still a solid sequel for me. It doesn't overly rely on references to the previous films that came before it, but at the same time it doesn't forget where it came from. Because Rocky is mentioned at least once by name in this movie when he's talking to one fighter about giving Damien another chance when he's not really counted on by anybody else. Rocky was in a similar position many years ago, and Apollo gave him that fair shot. So I like that this movie doesn't disregard Rocky Balboa completely. It does acknowledge that he's still out there, but he's not featured in the film at all. And I don't know exactly what was going on behind the scenes. I haven't really looked into it. I think that Sylvester Stallone sold all the rights to the character to Michael B. Jordan or whoever else owns the rights to it. I also heard that he has nothing against Michael B. Jordan personally, that there's no bad blood between the two, which is kind of refreshing to hear, and I think it kind of helps for Donnie to figure this stuff out on his own. But I also don't think it would have hurt for him to call Rocky at least one time, or for Rocky to reach out to him and say, "Hey champ, how you feeling? Is there anything you need?" Probably because I just love the character of Rocky so much. But if they decided to do their own thing with it and not be so reliant on the other stuff, I totally understand. One thing I really like that the film does, it slowly starts to reveal what exactly happened between Donnie and Damien so many years ago. The film doesn't show you everything right away, but as it goes on, it slowly starts to put the pieces together, and by the time a certain emotional height happens, we as the audience start to realize what Donnie's been hiding all this time. And I also think it enhances the experience of watching Creed 1 and 2. That it's not just the stuff with his father that he's been dealing with all this time. It's all the other things that he's been dealing with his friend, because he felt like he never really got to reconnect or reconcile with him. And Victor Drago does actually show up in this movie and helps Donnie get ready for the final fight, which I actually really like seeing. Even though there's still some tension between the two, I liked how they, at least in some capacity, managed to call a truce. And as you'd expect, there's plenty of the usual tropes that we've seen in plenty of other boxing films, including all the other ones in this franchise. There's a boxer who is in a certain place in life, a certain person comes back into his life that makes him want to go back into the ring one more time, and there's a training montage, which that has a really cool nod to the training montage in Rocky IV. Not gonna say what it is, but when I saw it, I thought,
I understood that reference.
It may not be the most groundbreaking attempt in this franchise or in the boxing film genre, but I think the way it plays out is very tasteful and effective, especially in how they enhance the final boxing fight. I was tempted to go into certain details about that, but I don't think it's entirely necessary. If you've seen the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. As for gripes that I have, I think the film is a little too short. I think it's about maybe just under 2 hours, like an hour and 50-something minutes, which is kind of refreshing to see that not every film has to be at least 2 hours or over 2 hours, but I think it was a little too tight, and it might have benefited from just being drawn out by maybe an extra 10 or 15 minutes. And it plays into the way the film ends, which I really like the ending, but I still would have liked maybe just an extra scene or two. And the musical score, while they do have a similar echo of what we hear at the end of the final fights in some of the other previous Rocky movies, the one that goes da 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 da. The score itself is fine, but to me it doesn't really stand out. And I feel like in a movie like this, you need to have some kind of musical score that can really capture people's attention. But all in all, I really do like Creed 3. I do think it's a solid continuation of this franchise, tastefully embracing all the boxing trope cliches while presenting them in a somewhat different light. And if this is the end of the franchise, I'd be totally fine with it, but apparently there's going to be another one. Whatever the case is, we'll see what they do with it. Just watch, they're going to have him fight Tommy Gunn Jr. So thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on Creed 3 if you've seen it. See you in the next one, and keep punching.